And everyone confirm that chat is enabled. There we go. Got
Yeah,
it
there we
coming
go.
in now.
Should be working.
That's the technical, that's hopefully all the technical stuff done. Uh,
It's always during the webinars too, man.
it
I
is,
remember
man. Do you
we
know what
had
it
we forgot to like upgrade our Zoom account on one, and it hit like past 100 people, and then you couldn't like join, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And yeah, oh my gosh, and it always
Yeah,
happens like, on the day of, I swear.
it does. Do you know what? And like when you're in the practice room, everything looks fine. You can stop sweating. Someone says my camera quality is good yet. No, it's not a webcam. I got like quite an aggressive camera setup going on right now. Um, cool. Well, I think like there's people still joining, but I think we just get started. We're recording anyway, so we're all good here. Let me just remove. Uh, there we go. Cool. Lovely stuff. All right, Patrick, mate, welcome, 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 welcome to the Triggerfire webinar. Dude, I've been watching your content for a long time now. I like describe you as like you had like Eric originally that like blasted onto the scene with like Clay content, and I kind of feel like put like Clay on the map for all of his fancy workflows. And then suddenly out of nowhere, like you became like the face for Clay, and like I don't know if say overtaking, but certainly became like this. It was almost like the new era of like Clay 2.0. And that's when I was like, shit, this guy's pretty good at these Clay tables. And I just used to watch what you do. I mean, the one you built the other day was freaking insane as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, Eric and I are close, and he taught me a majority of, what I know at this point. Honestly, I think the reason my content took such a resurgence is Eric stopped making content, at least as much content, because he was doing so well in his own business that he was just like, I need to go focus on operations. And I was like, shoot, okay, I'll start making some as well. And yeah, so massive props to him, and I obviously appreciate the compliments. It's a ton of fun building these flows out and sharing them with people.
Wicked, wicked, man. So today, like what I was really keen to get on with you because like I feel like you're the Jedi with the clay tables and like automation flows is let's talk about like you posted in your LinkedIn post, which I thought was really interesting, talking about like campaigns that just keep running. Like, what is it to you? Like, what's your perception on an evergreen campaign? What have you done historically out of interest before obviously playing around with us that you've done for like an evergreen campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's also worth looking at this specifically from an agency owner's perspective, because that's kind of the reason I started loving evergreen campaigns to begin with. And then turns out our clients kind of felt the same way. So in the beginning, when we started using tools like Trigify, the main reason that it really drew my attention were two things. Obviously, like the intent data was just incredible and far better than cold outreach data. And the second thing being that I didn't want to have to keep reloading all of our campaigns with leads, especially in the early days of my agency when I was running it by myself and I didn't have anybody to help me with doing so. And so I was really just looking for a way to have these leads pretty much auto import into a clay table automatically. And because obviously, like I could make a build out and then it benefited my client because they wouldn't have to continue paying me to refill the campaign and like use the system. It would just run forever indefinitely. And then also I would not obviously have to do all of that like kind of menial, like tedious work. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I initially discovered it. It was pretty difficult to find great tools in the beginning, especially like pre-Triggerify to use to do this because there was two main functionalities that I would need. Obviously, the first thing being that the data that was coming in was solid and actually fitting of the ICP that I was trying to source for my client. And for I'm sure most of the people who have done lead sourcing in the past, there aren't many great lead sources. Like I mean, we were using like Apollo, Ocean.io, obviously Clay's native integration, but it's difficult to find webhooks that will import those ICP leads automatically. So that was the first problem. And yeah, the second problem was if you did find good leads, especially in a software that could find them continuously, the webhook functionality usually didn't work. And so, in short, it was tough to find that stuff. It was just
Hmm.
like hard from a high level to find tables that could run on their own with relevant data that I wouldn't really have to worry about being bad. I mean, even an example of this would be something like RB2B, who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. even that data sometimes is like a little iffy, and you have to have like a kind of a filter on whether the data is relevant, because sometimes it'll identify a website visitor and you're like, this is not definitely not a person that visited my website. So you'd have to apply like this ICP filter. But with Trigify, it was just like it's always the person engaging with my LinkedIn profile. So I at least know that they, know who I am, which is a plus.
Yeah, right. And you used it from like a different perspective, which I think's like we've had we've done a few of these recently, these webinars, when everyone's been thinking about using it from like their own content perspective. But one of the like the challenges, or I guess one of the things that way people view us, right, is like, hey, you've got to have like a LinkedIn or a, social presence anywhere to like be able to reap the rewards. But you've used it from like thought leader perspective, right? From what I understand and what you're going to show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what one of the main benefits is that you can source leads from not just you, but anybody. Um, like there are not that many people out there in the pool of LinkedIn users that are posting regularly on LinkedIn. And then there's even an even smaller pool of people who are posting regularly enough and getting enough engagement to where it's relevant. And so being able to track other people and source that information is also a massive plus. I mean, ultimately, the reason you're tracking thought leaders is because they're probably in your space, and the people engaging with their content likely would be interested in your product or service. And so then you can just get far more leads from doing that than you
Right.
could your own LinkedIn account. At least generally, like unless you have like, 10, 20, 50, 100,000 followers on LinkedIn, it's going to be pretty tough to, get enough meaningful leads from your own LinkedIn account.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
definitely a big
fair.
plus as well.
And like, I guess the volume is always still like a little bit low. Are you thinking like we got quite a few agencies on the call? Um, how before we dive into that clay table, like it's interesting to think about it from like a high level perspective. Like, how would you think about pairing like an evergreen campaign, which is like it is lower volume in the grand scheme of things, and in comparison to I think what people are used to? How do you think about it? Do you pair it with like another like campaign that runs at the same time and you've kind of got two different like approaches to perhaps working with a client, an evergreen, maybe a little bit more hyper personalized, and then like another kind of more static based list
Yeah,
building?
for sure. So we kind of view our cold outbound initiatives and our warm outbound initiatives as completely separate things, because the way in which you approach them, as well as the nature of each campaign, are so vastly different that it's really not worth, I would say, grouping them in the same thing. And so for almost all of our clients, we have both running at the same time. And what I tell all of our clients when we get started in an engagement is we run a cold outbound initiative, because if we can find message market fit in cold outbound, all of the warm outbound is going to be so easy. And it's just like a cherry on top, super low hanging fruit. It's just so easy. Like if you can get cold outbound to work and you can get that messaging to work, all of your warm outbound initiatives will be like incredibly fruitful, because as you can imagine, there's two reasons that they'll be significantly better. The first one is you're usually using like a multi-channel tool, like you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, maybe Twitter, maybe email. So obviously the reply rates are significantly higher for warm outbound.
Yeah.
And of course, they are somewhat familiar with you or your product or your service. And so both of those things will, of course, increase response rates significantly. So if you can get an effective outbound campaign running cold, warm won't be a problem. So the way we kind of structure it is cold outbound is meant for testing messaging. With warm outbound, it's a little iffy. You don't want to like kind of just burn all these warm leads testing messaging. And so we usually
Hmm.
use cold ICP leads to test the messaging. Obviously, once we hit message market fit, we just scale to the moon. And then we get that messaging, or at least similar messaging, the same value props, the same offers, and translate them to the warm outbound campaigns.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I really like that approach. Find message market fit. What are you defining as message market fit? Like, is there a response rate that you think is, hey, this works now?
Yeah, this is, I feel like, one of the main points of contention between cold email agencies or cold outbound agencies. There is, in my opinion, no specific number that you can assign to every company,
Yeah.
but the way we generally think about it is based on the size of your TAM. So, like, if you have a massive TAM, like you have like, 1 million people in your like reasonable TAM, then getting 1 in 300 people to positively respond is pretty great, because you can
Yeah.
just scale that to, new levels. I mean, imagine the amount of business you'd get from that. But if your TAM is smaller, maybe like 10, 20, 30,000 people, then you really gonna have to go for under 100. 1 in 100. So I think it's really contingent on your market and how big it is, but usually within that range.
Cool.
Obviously, I'd love to have a campaign that's like 1 in 20, 1 in 30, and occasionally we'll get those. But like if we're kind of on the border, then yeah, it's usually between like 100, 150, and then the like 300 would be like maybe the
Yeah.
highest threshold.
Nice. We did a session the other day with someone who's using us and got a 1 in 4 reply rate.
Jeez, what
Yeah,
were they doing?
they were tracking me. Ironically, they were using my own tool to track me to pull my engagement, and they hooked it up to HeyReach. They were doing LinkedIn automation. I've noticed like LinkedIn automation off the back of this stuff is wild. Like it really converts. But then again, I did a test the other day with this because the volume's so low, but the because the relevancy is so high, it just has a better reply rate. I took Gmail accounts, purchased them the same day I started using them. I didn't bother warming them up or anything.
Yeah.
And the volume is about 3 to 5 emails per day, but just hooked it up on top of a thought leader and on top of a competitor that I was tracking. And instantly, I've got a 35% reply rate on that campaign. From that 35%, 40% positive. So like, I book more meetings than I would with like 3 weeks, 3 weeks aged domains and warmed up and
Yeah.
everything like that, which is wild to me because also I hate domain chat. Like I cannot be bothered with
Yeah.
it.
Oh my gosh. I totally agree. Like I actually hired somebody full time at my agency whose entire job is doing that because I get so frustrated with deliverability. It's changing all the time and I never know what like so I'm just like he's the expert. You do it yourself. But I agree with the LinkedIn sentiment. I mean, like I think you should meet people where they're at. So if they're engaging with you on LinkedIn, that means they're active on LinkedIn and they know who you are. So like why would you not run a Hey
Go
Reach
meet him.
campaign if you
Yeah.
can? And
Yeah.
also, I know like the volume is somewhat low, but I will say like after hooking up just my own account to Trigify, I immediately got like 17, 1,800 people on the list. So like it's not insanely low volume, like there's,
Mm.
I mean, at least if you're posting content, I guess. And then of course, if you're using thought leaders, you'll probably get even more. So
Yeah.
it's I would say still somewhat impressive. Like if you're running a Hey Reach campaign, 1,700 leads will if you're using one account, it'll get you like, like a month or two worth of outreach. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Well, they got 49, there was like 49 meetings from 300 leads or 360 leads or something like that, which
that
is
is insane.
it's insane.
Wow.
Yeah, it's wild. But let's dive into this. I'm super curious, like what you've managed to build within Clay using some Triggerfy data. And guys, for everyone that's on the call, I want to make this as like interactive as possible. So rather than yeah, I think we'll go for it. Like rather than waiting for like questions at the end, which is how we tend to run a lot of these. Like if we've got questions, fire them in. We can either bring you in like mid chat, or we can just answer the questions that you put into the webinar chat there as well. So like just go for it, and we'll try and make this one as interactive as possible as we go through it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. I'll start walking through kind of the build out that I created. So you can see my screen fine.
Yeah, man, got you.
Awesome. So I'll kind of give you the high level on what I wanted this table to achieve. The goal was to create a clay table that essentially like once shared to the people who attended this, and obviously once we like, end up posting this stuff on socials, something that essentially everybody could use slash need. And so I'll first kind of walk through the data that we're using for the table and then go into like the flow and how we're actually like actioning upon that data. So for those who haven't been in Trigify, they have this pretty incredible signals function that can pretty much just source everybody who engages with your content into one place. And of course, when you connect it to a webhook, imports that data into Clay. And so, as I mentioned before, I mean, even for just me, there's 1,700 people right here. I've connected some other thought leaders in the space, even Clay's own account here. And yeah, and I pretty much I think there's a couple cool functions here. The first thing is that you can create AI smart tags to like categorize people automatically. Obviously, when you're doing lead scoring, it just makes things significantly easier. You can also see what sort of engagement that they've had with you. Like there's a lot of one likes here, but you can see that some people have like liked my stuff twice. It tracks all of that in a pretty consolidated way, as well as shows the post, etc. And you'll actually see all this information actually in the Clay table as well. And so When going into the actual table, I have this like template set up and I try to keep it at one row just to make the walkthrough somewhat easy. You can see when we get the webhook payload from Triggerfy, we get a ton of data. So shout out to you guys for how much data you get at the beginning
You
because
know, it's funny. I did one of these with Eric, and he was like, "Mate," he was like, "Jesus, the amount of data that you're sending through here is wild."
yeah, it's awesome because especially for those who don't know how Clay operates, it operates on a credit system. So when you're running enrichments, you're spending credits, and every piece of data you want to find costs credits. And so the more data you get from the original payload, the less you have to spend on credits. So it's just a massive money saver to begin with. But yeah, I mean, you can see here that like you have all the company data right here, you have all the prospect data right here, name, location, and then even like the sort of engagement data that you're getting from the prospect as well. Okay, so I mapped out a couple of the important data points that I found valuable into the table. So we have the first name, last name, full name, job title, their company's description. I thought the engagement type was also particularly great, specifically for personalization. You
hmm.
being able to say, "Hey, I saw you liked my post. I saw you commented on my post." Like that was, super helpful. The post text itself, also great for personalization. The post URL, if you had to do any scraping on the post itself, and then we have all of like the company's website, person's LinkedIn, company's LinkedIn. This is all from Triggerfy. I actually had to spend nothing to get all this data in the beginning, which again was just ridiculously helpful. You'll see the amount of enrichments I use actually aren't even that much because I didn't have to do that much in order to get like the output I was looking for. Um, so first thing I did, um, and these are actually like somewhat redundant. In hindsight, I probably could have not even done these given the amount of data I got from Triggerfy, but I enriched the people and the company in Clay. Essentially, what it does is it gives you all of their LinkedIn data. So you get a ton of their LinkedIn data from Triggerfy. You can get some additional stuff as well, like all of their past experience and all of the education that they've gotten in the past. So like there's a little bit of extra stuff, but I actually never even actioned upon that in this table. So I did that with
Nice.
both the person and the company. You can see all this information. And for those who don't like, use Clay or don't know how it works, it's really, really simple. You just click add enrichment, you put in like enrich person, and this would get us all their LinkedIn data. You click on it and you literally just throw in their LinkedIn profile URL, which, Triggerfy already gave us. And then you run the integration and you get all of that info. So from there, what I wanted to create was a lead scoring mechanism that would allow me to categorize the leads coming in from my LinkedIn engagement into one of five buckets. The first bucket being like the highest, we won't say highest intent, but like the best fit for my ICP, the people I want to prioritize the most in my outreach. And fifth being like, I do not want to talk to you. You have, you're not in my ICP. You're not really relevant to the thing I'm selling. So first thing I wanted to do to figure that out was find the company's revenue. To me, that's pretty valuable. At least with my agency, we kind of have like a minimum revenue threshold for companies we'll work with. And so the way we did that is by using a tool in Clay called Claygent. For those who don't know what Claygent is, it's pretty much like an AI researcher. So you can just like put in a prompt and it'll go scrape the web, scrape the internet for that information. And so we have a very long prompt here, pretty much just saying go to Zoom Info, go to Owler, and go to Crunchbase and try to find the company's revenue from those three things and then output your results from all three searches. The reason this is helpful is because A, if you wanted to go to Crunchbase or Owler or ZoomInfo, usually it would cost thousands of dollars to have a plan for most of these. And we can do it completely for free by scraping their SEO pages. And so we're doing this for like fractions of a cent as opposed to the like several dollars per lead it would cost normally. So you can
Wow.
see we have the info revenue, we have the Aller revenue, we have the Crunchbase revenue. And then of course we have that all aggregated into a final revenue count right here. From there, we actually had all the other data I needed to do ICP classification. So I'll show you kind of generally what my prompt is here. I pretty much just said I'm looking to classify this prospect into one of five ICP categories. And then here are the five categories. You can see pretty much classified over 50 million in revenue or under 50 million in revenue. The other thing is whether they're manager or above or below manager position. And then the third thing is whether they're in the B2B SaaS or agency space or not. So this is kind of how I classify our ICP. Maybe not 50 million. I usually go a little like lower than that, maybe like 10 to 20, but I figured I would have it classified this way just for example's sake. So you can see here, if they fall into any of these categories, it'll classify them. And the way we are able to classify them is because I feed all that information provided by Trigify just in here. And then, of course, the revenue thing that I created before as well. And then it outputs 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Again, number 1 being the best fit and 5 being I don't want to talk to you. From there, I run an email waterfall. This waterfall only runs if they're 1 through 4, because obviously if they're 5, I don't want to talk to them. There's no point in running credits. So this email waterfall pretty much uses, I think, 6 different data providers to try to find their email. Somehow this, or 7, and somehow this person does not have an email publicly available, which like there's like a 95% coverage generally. So that's pretty crazy that they didn't find an email. But I digress. And then we upload this person's information to HubSpot. Again, another conditional run. So they have to have an email. So in this case, it didn't get uploaded. And then also I put in the run settings that if they're a 5 on this ICP scoring list, we just don't add them because again, we don't really care about them in that case. All
Interesting.
right. So we've got all that done. Now the final thing is just adding them to a campaign automatically. And so, I mean, obviously all this information is cool, but if you don't want your SDRs having to go through this table one by one to reach out to them, then, here's a good solution. I have a first line prompt, pretty much just saying, I'm running a first line and I want it to be structured like this. Hey, first name, I saw you that engagement type with my post on post details. So pretty much just saying, hey, I saw you like my post about blank. You get the general point. And since we have the post text and we have the engagement type from Trigify, it's super easy to just have this output. It was a pretty short and simple prompt. I put a little example here, and you can see here that the first line was created pretty easily. So, hey, Dakota, saw that you like my post about top startups. And then the rest of the email you could either, of course, create more personalizations in Clay, just like how I did here, or you could keep it simple and have that, and then just have your value prop in a LinkedIn message right after that. A quick offer. Hey, do you want to get on a call? This is pretty much just to reference the intent signal. And then we would add it to a multi-channel campaign on Live Growth Machine. So those who don't know what Live Growth Machine is, multi-channel tool, you can send on both LinkedIn and email to the same person. And so the idea here was reaching out to them on LinkedIn with a few sequences, on email with a few sequences, and suddenly you have this machine. So the cool thing about this table, you never have to touch it. Once you've created this one time and it works correctly and you've tested it on enough leads, you can just let this forever be your LinkedIn engagement outreach table as long as the copy's working. You're getting results. So yeah, I mean, you pretty much just automated like a full SDR's work with this table. And now your SDR can focus on like taking calls and actually like closing deals or just doing more important high level things. Or if you're a startup, obviously you just don't have the time to be doing outreach manually. It's a great way to do it. So
Yeah, nice, nice. And when would you like with these things, like people like set them and then run them for like several months without ever changing them? And I always think to myself, like, what should be the best practice about like tinkering and updating the copy with an evergreen campaign?
yeah, I mean, I fully do mine based on results. So there's 2 reasons you should change your copy. The first one is that you've tested enough leads and you haven't gotten meaningful results. That would be the first obvious one. And the second one is if for some reason performance is dropping off for your campaign. I mean, if it's working, I would say don't change much. Like unless you want to test a little bit, like, and see if something works better, which of course is good.
Mm,
I'm big on like if your copy is working to some extent, maybe improve your offer a little bit. But if the general flow of the message is resonating with prospects, then don't change it.
right.
Um, but yeah, I think it's really just an effectiveness thing. I mean, ultimately, is it getting leads? Is it not getting leads? If it is, then you can leave it alone for a little while. Obviously, if you have a new offering or you think something can be improved, then change it.
Okay, cool. We had a question come in here around your thoughts on the growth machine. You're gonna know where this one's gonna go. The growth machine versus Smart Lead versus Hey Reach for deliverability. Um, they're asking how is the growth machine's deliverability?
Yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn, your deliverability should ideally just be 100%. There's not really a deliverability problem there. When with regards to the email deliverability, it's fully dependent on the email accounts you connect to LGM. And if you create the email accounts correctly and you connect them to LGM and you're sending it a volume that is, let's say, safe and healthy for that email account, then you shouldn't have a problem. And there shouldn't be much of a difference between Smart Lead and HeyReach.
Nice.
The reason I would ever use Smart Lead and HeyReach instead of LGM is if you're trying to apply more volume while still using different channels. Like LGM can only reach out to so many, like you pretty much create an identity in LGM. So like you can only reach out to like maybe 30, 40 people a day safely. Smartly, you can create like a million email accounts and just send like, you can just send thousands if you wanted to. And HeyReach can send quite a few as well if you wanted to add several LinkedIn accounts. So that's how I would do it.
Fine. Okay, interesting. And we had Frank in the chat asked, so are you choosing which posts to run into Triggerfy, or is this all post? This is all post, Frank. You can select. So there's two options with like pushing it into like La Growth Machine or Clay or wherever you want to basically send this data. You can either choose what we call like an auto push. The auto push will send everything, or there is like a one-step click process. So it's more of like a manual process. From there, you can then select specific posts that go into whichever end point that you'd want to send them into. Um, Question for you. I noticed on your Triggerfy account that you were tracking Jesse, Clay, and was it Nick?
Yeah, I think it was. It was so we have Eric, Clay, Nick, Jesse, and then me.
Okay. What would be your approach, for example? Well, first of all, what made you, or what do you think should be the factor with selecting a thought leader when it comes to your outbound? Like, what should you look for?
Yeah, two things. The first one is their level of engagement. Like there are a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I'm sure all of us have seen them who have a ton of followers and really don't get that much engagement. And so, like, I wouldn't just try to find the biggest person in my space and track them, especially if they're not getting like the engagement that you'd expect out of them. So that's, I guess, like the most basic thing. The second thing is actual relevance. Like, I would easily get somebody with 5,000 followers whose audience is like the exact people I'm looking for than somebody with 50,000 who's just doing like sales across the board. Because
Mm,
obviously sales is a really broad topic, but Clay in particular is very specific. And so like if I was to really want to do like a perfect outbound campaign, Eric would be my guy I'd run outbound campaigns on because Eric posts pretty much nothing but Clay stuff. All of his people who follow him know Clay, they love Clay, and like it would just make perfect sense if I wanted to run a campaign on his audience and just because I mean he's at capacity, so he doesn't even need any more clients. So I might as well reach out to him myself.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's like focusing on the topic area, isn't it? It's the topic area that that individual posts about, or identifying the topic themes. I funny enough did a similar one with Adam Robinson. He posts about like four like content themes typically. It's like founder-led content, uh, VC versus bootstrapped, and there's like two others. And so I actually use similar like what you've done with like the ICP scoring and tagging. I've used that, but based on the content that the individual is engaging with. So then I know which bucket they fit into and qualify if they fit into the theme of that bucket that's relevant for me based on the engagement that that thought leader is effectively getting.
yeah, that's a perfect way to approach it because I agree. I think like most thought leaders are not posting about one thing for the most part. Like there's some variability in what they're posting. And
Yeah.
so bucketing that properly is pretty important. But yeah, I totally agree. Like the nature of their content should be the main thing you're looking at because like if they're only posting about Clay 1 in 5 posts, then you're going to be getting a lot of data in that's less relevant. And frankly, like I would just find the person you could even find like 2 or 3 people that just post exclusively about the thing that you're working in. For me,
Yeah.
it's Clay, so it's very obvious. Like especially Clay's own posts. Like, yeah, I want to find everybody who's engaging with Clay's posts.
Mm. Interesting. Okay. And then the with your content, so obviously your initial line that you used was like, thanks for like engaging with my content, right? With pushing through your own engagement. What would be your thoughts on the type of copy should people be reaching out to either competitors or thought leaders? Like what angle do you think would be the best angle to go down from a copy standpoint?
Yeah, I think the main thing to focus on is if you're going to reference that, hey, I saw you engage with X's post, which I'm kind of iffy on that as a strategy from a high level because I get those messages all the time and I'm like, okay, like you saw that I liked Eric's post. Congratulations. Like the amount of emails I get saying, hey, I saw you like engage with Eric Nowoslawski's post is insane. Like especially specifically him. But
Yeah.
like So if you do it, it has to be kind of done tastefully. I don't even think you should, if somebody liked his post, you should not mention it at all because it's like that's kind of weird. How are you going through the likes of their post? If they commented, then you should be talking about their comment specifically and putting some actual value add to the conversation of the comment, not just saying, "Hey, I saw you commented." So if you're going to mention the engagement at all, make it somewhat relevant to your
Yeah.
value. Um, and Otherwise, I would probably say don't reference it whatsoever, and just try to reference like their general relatability to the space. Be like, hey, I saw that I've seen you've kind of been floating around the space in clay, for example, and like,
Mm,
I've seen a lot of your comments just over LinkedIn recently. Figured I'd reach out. So it'd be like a broader connection. I still think it's good to have like a relevant first line referencing some connection to the space that you're working in, but sometimes
yeah.
it's a little weird to be like, hey, I saw you liked this post on blank. Like, I'm always just like, you definitely automated that. And if you didn't, then it was a bad first line. So,
Yeah. One fun thing that I was doing with like a client around this like particular topic area because we were discussing um thought leaders and how to write the copy for thought leaders. And I talked about, you take a thought leader, you work out the topic areas that they tend to talk about. Like we're actually hopefully going to introduce something inside of Triggerfy which surfaces those topic areas so that people don't need to do that level of research. But then you use Clay and you break down the post that people are engaging with. So as an engager comes in on that thought leader, you work out whether that post is engaging within like one of those four categories. Um, from there, when you reach out based off the topic that they tend to engage with the whole time. So I'll just use a really easy, obvious use case, which is I'll use Adam again. He talks about founder-led content. So if I seen based on the flow that someone's engaging with, like founder-led content, multiple times, I'll reach out being like, hey, I can see that, founder-led content is of interest to you. And then I'll hit them with like a specific lead magnet that builds on that value. And so I use Smart Lead. So I have like different campaigns with different lead magnets waiting based on me monitoring Adam, for example. And then what I'll also do at the end is like PS, Adam Robinson talks a lot about this, worth following him, knowing full well that they're engaging with him. So then when
yeah,
I reference as like, oh, by the way, this is someone you should follow, they'll be like, oh, I already do. Like, I know this person. And it's like a subtle way of like
yeah.
dropping, like using like a familiar name, which will resonate with them, but without being creepy, saying, I see you're like liking all of this content the whole time.
I really love that approach of just like knowing that they already follow him and engage with him and just being like, yeah, you should give him a follow. Cause then like, it's such an easy response back. Like, oh, I already do. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, yeah, I already do
Yeah.
that.
So we
That's
got
great.
a couple of questions that have come in from one from Justin here. How do you send messages on volume? Is it a combination of in-mail and DM or just DM with connections?
I only do DM with connections. That's generally how HeyReach works. So I actually don't do any in mailing for the most part. And I'm also I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this as well, Max, but I'm very stingy on how many LinkedIn messages I send out from my personal account. Obviously,
Mm.
like a lot of the inbound from my agency is from my LinkedIn. So getting banned is kind of like a massive fear of mine. And so I usually get whatever HeyReach recommends and cut it into like a third, and then I send that level of volume. So
Yeah.
I would say that's the reason that LinkedIn as a channel is specifically good for use cases like this. Like I don't do much cold LinkedIn outreach because the volume is just not there and I can't really test the copy properly. But if I have copy down, I start using LinkedIn for warm message for warm outbound, like from Tricify, essentially.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I do you know what? Like you got to be so careful. Like we call a spade. Like you got to be careful with LinkedIn automation. Like the best thing to do really with it is just mimic a genuine human behavior, right? So like, and I think you're right. I never really thought about it from that, and it's obviously good because it fits our narrative. But like using data from Triggerfy flowing into like a LinkedIn automation tool is really, really strong. And I think that's why we've seen such really, really good results because it's highly relevant. It can be very like personable when you reach out to someone via that process. Um, if your LinkedIn is a LinkedIn channel such as yours that gets a lot of inbounds, I would probably opt into using someone else's in the team for it, in all honesty.
Yeah, for
That's the
sure.
approach I take. I don't do mine, but Hugo, our COO, I'm all over his, and I just control it. Is like the approach that I take when it comes to that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of, especially as we've been moving up market with our clients who have like their team has they have quite a large team. We're always like, just go find somebody on your team who doesn't really use LinkedIn that much and doesn't care about their account, and just incentivize them a little bit to use it, and then just use that one. Because I agree, like it's too sketchy to be, especially if you have if you're using a LinkedIn account as a marketing channel or a primary lead source, getting that banned is like Armageddon. So, it's just not worth doing.
We had another question come in around do a webinar around content pillar topic trigger as a strategy. Yeah, we will definitely do a webinar around how you can take the kind of thought leader or competitor and look at that kind of topic pillar. And then Ryan's asking you talk about the social listening feature at some point. Ryan, what specifically do you want to talk about? I mean, well, let's go on to that subject. I don't think you've had a chance to play with it, Patrick, our social listening feature, but I'm curious, like, so with our social listening, you can monitor like specifically what people are talking about rather than the engagement, right? So it's like a different angle to use. Have you ever done any like social listening campaigns before? I mean, curious, I've not even asked you this actually.
Yeah, funnily enough, no, because there's not a tool, but probably before Triggerfy. And this is not even like an ad. I'm telling you, there was not a good tool for it until now. Like I genuinely don't think there was a good enough one. So we actually had it. The only one we kind of did one time is we would do conference campaigns. And so like we would scrape all of the campaigns that had mentioned a specific conference, assuming that the person posting about it was going, and we'd reach out to them saying like, hey, are you interested in potentially meeting up while you're at the conference? But like that's kind of like a hybrid, like maybe not completely even social listening, but no.
No, I mean that's a great use case. Funny enough, we just went to SaaStock in Dublin to it was 2 months ago, a month ago. Anyway, we had every single post streaming in, everyone talking about SaaStock. It booked us. I mean, it's a lot easier to book meetings, right, at these events because everyone's kind of going there for events,
Yeah.
right? So take it with a little bit of pinch of salt. But from that, basically what we did is we were monitoring anyone talking about SaaStock as soon as the system picked up, which it does it, we had it where it was doing it pretty much in real time. It would enter it into a flow where we would then basically qualify that they're ICP just based on job title, really alone. It was quite a rudimentary one that we had, and then just instantly email them. But what we also did now, it's probably not completely GDPR compliant, but we also hooked it up to like a WhatsApp, right? And just send, hey, like I can see you're at the event. Would love to like have a chat. We booked over 40 meetings, like at the event for me just to go and speak to them purely through that social listening. So it's a really, really cool use case. I
Yeah,
think
I totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah, we have like 3 or 4 clients who like we've pretty much like our motion now is just every time they go to a conference, we do that. Like it's like standard because it works so well. I mean, it's just like so much easier than a conventional cold email where you're like, let's get on a Zoom. It's like you're gonna be here, I'm gonna be here. Usually our offer, or I guess like final message or question, is always like what events are you going to? Because it's also like a very soft ask. But yeah, we ran one for one of our clients recently for Dreamforce, and we got like I think it's like 30 meetings and like 3 days of outreach, and apparently they ended up closing like more than 100K in deals just like from that, which is kind of wild because I was a bit concerned about the translation between meeting at a conference and closing deals, but
Yeah.
they me they proved to me that it works. So
Wow, that's insane. 100K out of the back of that. That's a nice bit of ROI. Yeah, I mean, social listening is a really interesting concept because you're effectively you don't get a bigger level of intent from that, right? And there's two ways of thinking about it. Depends on the outcome. And I just seen Ryan's message. He's looking for business owners who are thinking about selling their companies, wondering if this could be useful. Yes, you could search for like anyone who is physically saying like, "Hey, I'm looking to sell my company," but it's probably going to be like a dime a dozen. It's going to be very rare that someone just posts on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, I want to sell my company." So really, like, what you need to start to do is start to look at what would they start to post about in the run up to something like that, and then also I think actually more Ryan for you, it's like the social signals, and this is where it's really interesting. So is start understanding who that individual is engaging with, and if they're engaging with any PE or VC companies, right? So you could get a load of business owners and track what they're doing. And if they're starting to then engage with particular posts from these firms, that's going to start to give you the insight that perhaps they're moving in a trajectory where this could be relevant for them. And that's the kind of key thing, right? All of this is there's no silver bullet, and there's no intent tool out there that actually gives you intent. It gives you signals. From there, you need to interpret the signals and try and find that relevancy, right? And that's like the whole concept about social is you get more breadcrumbs than you do anywhere else, and you're trying to basically pick up on them. But
Yeah, and also yeah, I would say the signal is significantly stronger than a lot of the other ones out there. Like, because you're pretty much like people are, I mean, with selling your company, it's a little different because yeah, again, you'd have to find the posts that lead up to it. But for a lot of other things, it's just like they're literally saying like in plain English what they're planning on doing. Like the conference one is a great example. It's
yeah,
like, I'm going to X conference. Who wants to meet up? It's like, wow, that's pretty high intent. They want to meet with people at this conference and they're in my space and they're ICP. So like,
yeah,
it's not hard
yeah.
to translate.
But like that's the beauty about it, isn't it? The whole of social is like first person level of intent, whereas typical signals and triggers, they're always company levels, which you know and we offer like company levels, but it doesn't give you that same level. Everyone's kind of selfish if you think about it. When you're selling to someone, you've got to think, okay, well, what's in it for them? Not what's in it for the business. Unless they're the founder, they obviously care about the business. Otherwise, if they're like a marketing director or a finance director, what makes them look good? And it's that same concept that like person level signals taps into is like, what is interesting to them and then tap into that basically.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
cool. Well, we're running out of time. So I thought we obviously had some questions coming in on the fly. But this is your chance to anyone who's in here, if they have any questions for Patrick or myself to answer them, whether it's related to the clay table or anything, any topic at all. Feel free to either raise your hand and I can bring you up, or just chuck it in the chat. And if nothing, we can wrap it up there. But we'll see if anyone puts it in. But man, it's been good having you on here. This has been your flow is like so calculated. I really like the ICP qualification fit there. It was epic.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I sometimes I get on these webinars and I'll just like demo the most like unusable and like complex and like ridiculous clay tables. And in this one, I was like, I just want to create a template that I think everybody can use because I think sometimes when I get on those webinars, it just gets overwhelming and I'm walking through like 50 different integrations and 50 different personalizations. But like you don't even need that. Like this is one of the more usable tables I've created. It's just like have one first line personalization, ICP qualify them, add them to your CRM, and reach out to them in a multi-channel campaign. That's really all that's necessary from a baseline. So,
Yeah.
um,
Wicked.
yeah,
You're gonna
it's
have to
been
chuck me that template so we can add it to the email that goes around so everyone can use it.
yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, it'll be a fun one to share. And yeah, this has been a ton of fun. It's Terrify, genuinely incredible tool. And whoever's on here, I'm not being paid to say that. Genuinely, I actually don't do webinars with tech that I don't use actively, because I'm so bad at like promoting something that I don't like. Like I can't do it. Like I have no idea. But it is, yeah,
A good
it's an
actor.
incredible tool. Yeah, exactly.
Someone just asked, can you share the table with us here? Go on. I don't know if you can pump it in for anyone who's left
Yeah,
school. They can have
totally.
belly before everyone else,
Here we
and
go.
then we'll wrap it up there.
There's a
There we go.
table. All right, sounds
Good,
good.
man. Link is in there. Well, listen, appreciate it. Thanks everyone for hopping on. We're going to be doing these webinars every week, really. Trying to get guests on, whether it maybe just be me. So like anyone who's in our Slack channel, ping any like topics that you want us to talk about, and we'll cover that. But yeah, hopefully it was valuable, and we'll keep going. And everyone, check out the new feature drop. I just told Patrick about it. It's honestly mind blowing, or at least for me, it's mind blowing. The ability to find people talking about specific things and the ability to then find people who are engaging with that in a list view. I typed in clay and it got me 27,000 people who are engaging with clay content.
That is insane. That's
Yeah.
insane data. All right, awesome. Well, appreciate it, Max.
Wicked. Cheers,
All right,
cheers, guys.
everybody.
Bye
Bye.
bye.